Oh, howdy all, grab yourself a beer, it's time for some Path of Exile discussion. Today, Grinding Gear Games released some statistics on Atlas passive points. What's popular, what's not popular, and I wanted to go through that and just give a few thoughts that I had from it. So firstly, this is broken down into the 9 different regions, the 8 normal Atlas regions, plus the Uncharted Realms, the hidden region. And additionally, it is split up between trade-enabled softcore, trade-enabled hardcore, the softcore solo self-found and the hardcore solo self-found modes of play. There's a bit of variance between those, but it is worth pointing out that that trade-enabled hardcore is an extremely unpopular gameplay mode in the current state of the game. Not many people play it, and so that means that, interestingly, the tamper-proof and twice tempted, the strongbox nodes here. So twice tempted gives you a 10% chance to get double use of a strongbox and adds more strongboxes. Tamper-proof causes them all to be corrupted and rare. This is something that I thought would be more popular than it is. Generally speaking, I recommend taking this as your first 4 points in Glenncans on many builds. And that's because it just is a fountain of corrupted 6 links. It's not that you get one in every map or anything like it, but this will provide so many Divine Orbs that it's probably, even with only 12.9% of players using it, it's probably the biggest single source of Divine Orbs in trade-enabled Ultimatum softcore. So next up we have Turnsend, and here we have That Which You Seek, which is the 10% chance to get a Mirror of Delirium. Again, this is one of the few nodes that a majority of people take in the trade-enabled league. And that's just because the Delirium mechanic is such a loot fountain still. Again, it's very rippy. It's almost as rippy as Ultimatum and Legion. So it's a lot less popular in hardcore, but it is something that can still be very strong in those game mechanics if you scale back how aggressively you juice your maps a bit in order to take advantage of the Delirium mirror when it shows. And there's more options to boost up a Delirium there. Then there's some options that are pretty powerful for Bestiary. This is one of the more popular zones to do your Einhar missions in. Interestingly, the Abyss nodes are quite unpopular in this region. I think that people are sleeping on Abyss a bit this league. There's a lot of XP to be had and a lot of monsters to kill when you're running Abysses. And that's the case both with the underground, like with the underground depths that are located in Turnsend, and also in particular with the new Vestia ones, which focus on amping up the abyssal troves. And the addition of Abyss Scarabs is a huge boost there. So that's Turnsend. Now, for some reason, GG put these out of order. I thought they were doing all 4 inner regions, and then they were going to go to Valdos Rest next. But no, they've decided to jump outward to Hayward Hamlet. And here we have the Ritual nodes are incredibly powerful. Ritual is one of those mechanics that if you're in a trade league, there is a very popular strategy that people have been experimenting with, where they spend an enormous amount putting 4 ritual vessels into every map that they run. And these people just basically buy ritual vessels in bulk from other players. So they then put 4 blood-filled vessels out of place. The key thing is that Einhar needs to be granting actual consumables that players want in bulk, and he's not doing that at the moment. Okay, so next we have Valdos Rest, where pretty much everyone is still taking Harbinger passives. Funny that, they're really, really, really good. And then there's just a wide mixture of what else people are taking. The Metamorph nodes are pretty unpopular at the moment, and that's something that's interesting. Metamorph's in a weird place where it can drop pretty much rewards from any content, but its only specialized rewards are catalysts. Catalysts are, a lot of them are coming out of Heist as well. A lot are coming from Delirium layers, but also the thing that's tricky with them is that players just don't use all that many of them. I think a lot of casual players look at the price of the Fertile Catalyst and the Prismatic Catalyst and say, "Oh, I can't afford to spend 20 of those, so I'm not going to bother." And then the sort of lesser catalysts, like the Abrasive Catalyst, the Turbulent Catalyst, they don't notice that they exist because they're thinking, "Oh, the right one for me is the Fertile Catalyst. I'm not going to use something else." So they're in an awkward spot at the moment. I don't know what it is. I just don't really like the Catalyst as a mechanic all that much, and people aren't using them for their abilities to influence crafting because they just don't do enough. So that's a couple of thoughts there. I think that that's just not working out all that well. Otherwise, though, if you're interested in Blight content, you're probably mapping in Lira Arthein instead of in Valdos Rest because it's just better. Okay, so next up we have Lex Doris, which has Pathological, which despite being nerfed, is still the most popular node on the entire tree. I believe with 62% of people taking it. Yeah, that's correct. Pathological is the most popular node. That's the one that causes 5% of your maps to drop with delirium layers already applied to them. And I think a lot of people look at that and think, 5% chance to get one delirium layer. But when you actually play with it, especially in 4 Watchstone maps, you pretty often get 40, 60, 40 and 60% delirious maps. 80 and 100 is really rare, but 40 and 60 is common. And so it means essentially it's not as good as getting one delirium orb drop per 20. Well, it's not as good as getting 2 delirium orbs dropping per 20 map drops, which would be amazing, but it's quite a bit better than it looks. The other delirium nodes in there are pretty good as well, especially if you are running 20% or higher delirious maps already. And then you have the Parandus nodes, which remain popular despite being absolute rubbish now, and the Metamorph nodes, which are absolute killers. It's really funny seeing the massive drop-off on Escaped Experiment, which is the one that causes a wild Metamorph to spawn in regions sometimes. So you can see it's 15.6% in